Good morning, everybody. Normally, when I put a video together, at least in the last few months, it has been what we call theological leftovers, things that were just left over from my study in preparation for the sermon from the previous week. And that we'll still do those things from time to time. But I read something that got me thinking again about something that I really enjoy studying, which is speech, talking, and how to talk together. Some of you have been through my Talking Together class, and you've seen or heard some of those videos. And I really still want to pursue some of those conversations and talk about some of those things. I love that theme, and I think it's very much needed. But I got to find stuff. I got to find more stuff, and I found some things that I want to share with you today, and probably for the next couple of weeks, because I think some of what I read requires a little bit more study. So anyway, let me get started. I was reading an English philosopher, and again, just because I'm reading something from something somebody said, doesn't mean that I'm endorsing that person and everything that they said. In some cases, I don't even really know the history or the beliefs of everything that these people that I quote have said. So again, if I quote somebody, that's not an endorsement of everything they have ever said. I think that's obvious, but I want to say it nevertheless. This particular English philosopher's name was Thomas Hobbes, and he had some things to say about speech that I thought were good and helpful, at least for me, and quite honestly, for me, very convicting. So today I want to read this to you. It's very brief. I want to explain it just a little bit as best as I can. And then I have a personal request. I'll say that, and then we'll finish up with a couple of Bible verses that'll hopefully get you thinking. Okay? So let's get started. Thomas Hobbes said these words. He said, "The general use of speech is to transfer our mental discourse into verbal, or the train of our thoughts into a train of words." Did you get that? I'll read it again. The general use of speech is to transfer our mental discourse into verbal, or the train of our thoughts into the train of our words. That's the general use of speech. And he says there are four purposes for doing this. I mean, I guess I could stay in my head and I could just think about things, but there are four good reasons to not keep everything in my head, not keep everything to myself. There are four good reasons to communicate what's going on up here through this, right? And I haven't spent enough time studying all these things to talk about all four of them. I'm just going to talk about the first one, and I'm going to warn you, it's obvious. But just because it's obvious doesn't mean that we're doing a good job with it. It doesn't mean that it isn't something we should seriously consider. All right. So what is the first purpose that he mentions for taking what happens in here, what he calls the mental discourse, and making it verbal? He says it is to register what by cogitation we find. So today's speech class is about cogitation. And I have to admit, I'm a sucker for a good word, and I love that word, not a word that's used enough. We want to register what cogitation we find. And one of the ways we do that is with our speech. This first point, this first purpose of speech is important because we tend to speak too quickly, right? And what he's getting at here is, I think, is that we should make sure that our thoughts are fully formed before we speak. That if we want our words to communicate clearly what we've been thinking, then we need to make sure we've finished the thought. Does that make sense? Fully form your thought before you choose your words. And that's not only good because it keeps you from putting your foot in your mouth, it is also good because sometimes we lose the thought because we jump too quickly to the words that we use to try to communicate that thought. Speech is not a blessing when the words that we use do not adequately or correctly reflect what we have learned. It's not good for the person, right? We want to teach somebody something. We want to share something that we discovered. We got to make sure we use the right words, which means we can't go quickly from this to this. The other thing is, if we go quickly from this to this, it might change the way that we understand the thing. And I have this happen to me all the time. I don't know if this makes sense, but I have and let's call it an epiphany. I have a moment, right? Maybe I'm studying God's word and I recognize something profound, and I'm quick to try to put it into a sermon or put it into a video or just get it down in my journal or something like that. And I'm trying to figure out the right words. And I skipped the mental process so quickly that in my attempt to put the right words to what I was thinking, I changed the thought. Does that make sense? If we move too quickly to speech, if we don't cogitate, if we don't dwell on things long enough, we can lose the original thought completely. So it's not just be slow to speak because you may say the wrong thing to somebody. You might hurt somebody's feelings. You might teach the wrong thing. That's all true. But you might also lose your thought if you're too quick to speak. That's at least one of the reasons why Thomas Hobbes says to register what by cogitation we find. Take the time to think about the thing and to fully develop the idea in your brain before you try using your words. Now, I love this idea, and I'm convicted by this idea. And this is where my plea to you comes from. First, with a confession. I have a problem with this. You can see, because I'm looking at notes right now, I have trouble thinking. I really do. I have trouble thinking if I'm not in some way directed. I mean, I can read a little section and stop to think of it because I have the words to look at and read over and over and over again. Or I can take an idea that I heard, and I can think more fully on it if I talk about it or if I write it down. So I'll write down the quote and then I'll start thinking by writing things down. And that's not bad. It's good to write things down. It's good to have people to bounce ideas off of. These are blessings. These are gifts. But I think Hobbes is getting at the point that the moment we write something down, the moment we put it into words, we start to lose part of what was up here. So we have to be able to spend a significant amount of time in our heads just cogitating, just thinking. And I'm not good at it. I'm really not. In addition to that, I don't remember things very well at all. I've become dependent on writing things down so that I can communicate them to you, or so that I can just remember them and think on them again later. Now, I'm convinced a lot of this has to do with the fact that I don't give myself enough time where it's quiet, where there aren't distractions. And I'm sure that's a big part of it. I'm absolutely certain of it. I mean, as I put this, the notes for this video together, I was getting my tires changed on my car, and there was a TV on. There were people constantly coming and going, and I was getting the occasional text on my phone. How do I expect to remember anything with all that distracting input? So I'm sure time and quiet are key to this. But I just want to put that before you. This is a goal, to learn to think to be able to think without talking, without writing stuff down, right? Just to be able to think on a thing in here quietly. And if that's a challenge that you've had, if that's a goal that you have pursued, I would love to hear about your successes, and I would love to hear some suggestions from you. How have you made progress with these goals of learning to think without any talking, without any writing, just brain work, cogitation? This is key to good speech, and I want to be a good speaker. So this is important to me. If it's important to you, I would love to hear. Give me something to cogitate on. All right, let me know what you think. Now, I'm going to give you some things to cogitate on. I have 3 passages, all right? One from Proverbs and 2 Psalms that have something to say about this. The first is from the very first chapter of Proverbs. And this gets to that quiet thing I was talking about, the listening. Proverbs Chapter 1, I'm going to read 20 through 22 verses. Solomon writes, "Wisdom cries aloud in the street. In the markets, she raises her voice. At the head of the noisy streets, she cries out. At the entrance of the city gate, she speaks. How long, O simple ones, will you love being simple? How long will you scoffers delight in their how long will scoffers delight in their scoffing, and fools hate knowledge?" I especially am drawing your attention to one word, and that is noisy. It says wisdom comes out in the street, and she offers herself. She offers her wisdom. She cries out, "Come to me," right? And there's lots of things that keep people from coming to her. The scoffers delight in their scoffing. The simple love being simple, right? But the thing that really catches my eye in this text is the fact that when she comes out and she gives her invitation to everybody, what is the setting? The noisy streets, it says, right? At the head of the noisy streets, she cries out. Everyone is talking. Everyone. Who is listening? Who is listening to wisdom? We know it's not the person who loves to be simple. And we know that it is not the person who delights in their scoffing. But everyone is talking. Who will listen? Who will listen to wisdom? That's Proverbs chapter 1, 20 to 22. The next is from Psalm. It's a Psalm, chapter 143, verse 5. Psalmist writes, "I remember the days of old. I meditate on all that you have done. I ponder the work of your hands." 3 words: remember, meditate, ponder. Remember, meditate, ponder. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you experience? Ponder those things, right? And there's 2 categories of things to ponder. It talks about all that you have done, right? The psalmist wants to meditate on everything that God has done. That's a lot. The psalmist wants to ponder on the work of God's hands. So what are we talking about? What do we see? What do we hear? What have we experienced? Well, there's 2 realms for us to ponder and to meditate upon. One is creation, right? All of creation, the work of God's hands, includes God's visible creation, things that we can see with our own eyes and experience with our 5 senses and engage with and be engaged by. That includes the person in front of you, pondering the person in front of you because they are God's creation. Not being too quick to judge or anything like that, but to ponder, to meditate, to consider the work of God's hands. That's one realm. The other realm, obviously, at least I hope it's obvious to you, is God's revealed word. There are things that we are never going to understand simply based on our own observation of God's creation, because this is a fallen world and we're fallen people. So the world is affected. My brain is affected. My 5 senses are affected. My heart is infected. All of it's been impacted by the fall. And so there are some things I will only know if God chooses to reveal them. And so I have the Bible, right? And these are the two realms. And these are the things that the psalmist desires to meditate on and to ponder. So I give that to you. Psalm 143, verse 5. All this is stuff for you to cogitate on, okay? One last one, and I really like this one. It's Psalm 49, verse 3. The psalmist writes, "My mouth shall speak wisdom." I love that optimism. I love that optimism. I want to be that optimistic. I want to be able, when I speak, to speak wisdom. Don't you? That's what I want to do. I know people are going to react all kinds of different ways. Some of them are going to hate it, right? Hate it and call me hateful because I speak wisdom. I get it. But that doesn't change my mind. I want to speak wisdom when my mouth is open. And so listen to this. He says, "My mouth shall speak wisdom. The meditation of my heart," there's that word again, "shall be understanding." He makes this connection, right, between meditation and understanding. Stopping and thinking and cogitating and understanding. And if I want wisdom to come out of my mouth, then that meditation of my heart and that understanding is key. And I said verse 3, but I'm going to include verse 4 too. He says, "I will incline my ear to a proverb. I will solve my riddle to music of the lyre." This guy sounds like he's having a good time, right? This sounds like this is a joy for him to be able to incline his ear towards a proverb, right? You got some wisdom. I want to hear it. In the end, I may agree or disagree that it's wisdom, but I want to hear it nevertheless. I want to think on it. I want to consider it, right? I will incline my ear to a proverb. I will solve my riddle, right? I don't understand everything, and that's exciting. That means there's stuff for me to understand. I want to think on these things. Why? Because I want wisdom to come out of my mouth. And so I'm going to take the time. I'm going to think. I'm going to spend time in my brain, right? Not just with whatever pops into my head. That's not what these verses have pointed to. But I'm going to take time to consider the works of God's hands, right? His creation, his revealed word. I'm going to spend time thinking on these things. I'm looking to discover something so that wisdom comes from my mouth. I love it. He said, "I will solve my riddle to music of the lyre," right? I love that. I love the I don't know what to make of it, but I love the inclusion of music. Music in the background, helping them think. That combination of words and music definitely helps with the hymns. There's an awful lot I understand about my faith and I've grown to understand the confession of faith that is Lutheran, that is also mine. I've come to understand it in a lot of different ways, from great teachers and mentors, from reading the Bible myself, from reading the writings of some of the great heroes of faith from long ago, even from recent times. But from a hymnal, absolutely. With the word and the music together. So I don't know. I will incline my ear to a proverb. I will solve my riddle to music of the lyre. All I know is it sounds like this guy is totally loving spending time thinking about stuff. And he seems to share my goal. I want wisdom to come out of my mouth, right? That's the kind of speech that I want to participate in. Wise speech. So, let me get them again. Proverbs 1, 20 to 22 especially. Psalm 143, especially verse 5. And Psalm 49, verse 3. Some things for you to think about. Now, give me some things to think about. How can I learn to think? How can I learn to put thoughts together up here without having to talk to anybody or write anything down? What are your suggestions? Let me know what works for you, and let me know if I can share your thoughts with other people, because I'm sure there are other people who are trying to do the same thing. Thanks, guys. Hope you enjoy this topic. We'll look at the second point that Thomas Hobbes makes, maybe even go crazy and do the second and third point next week. God bless you all. Have a great week.